Hey guys, welcome back. So this is part 2 of our Sci-Fi Guy tutorial. So in the last part, this is where we ended up. We just ended up creating the base mesh for our character, and we didn't really take it as far as actually detailing it. So the base mesh is sort of low poly, but it's not good topology or anything like that. It's just kind of a messy clay dynomesh madness. But the intention was in the last video is just to create kind of the basic shapes that we need, that we can then take further and sculpt more and more detail, right? So all of our pieces in that state, right? It's just kind of a unorganized low poly version of our mesh. So in this video, let's just decide how do we want to move forward. So my intention again is to start creating something a little higher resolution, right? And to do this, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to focus on, let's focus on the body and the head first. All right, so to move forward, let's go ahead and take a look at the head and see where we left off in our last video. If I go to my subdivision, if I turn on my polyframe, I can see what the current resolution of the head looks like. And we probably don't want to destroy all of this topology. We do have some nice flowing edges and the nose, even though we could, even if we wanted to, we could optimize this further, like as a game character. But there's really no reason why we need to destroy all of this topology for the head, right? Other elements are not as important, but the head, might as well save some of this stuff. So for that reason, I am not going to turn it into dynomesh, but instead, let's just keep subdividing it to give us more resolution to play with, right? So if I go to the next level, let me take a look. If I do Control D, I can obviously give myself more resolution, and I'm going to take it to level 4 to start maybe sculpting just a little more detail on this guy, right? So let's talk about this and decide what kind of face do we want, right? And let's talk about the eyes as well. I think my intention is not to have this guy have eyes with like pupils and worry about, color of his eyes and all of that. Again, this is going to be more like a sci-fi robot guy. So I think this is going to be, might as well install some kind of give him goggles or something like that, right? Maybe his vision is super enhanced and it's more of a robotic, right? So I'm not going to worry about that, but let's talk about the features, right? The head features. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and hide everything else. And let's think about this. If I grab my move tool, right? Again, very slowly, let's just start deciding if we like how this character feels. One of the things that I'm looking at, I like the fact that I can start seeing the skull through his skin. But maybe it would be nicer if, let's turn the symmetry on. Maybe it would be nicer if the jaw was, or the chin was a little bit stronger, right? It just feels maybe a little too weak. So let me just start just moving it just a little bit, right? Just make it maybe a little more sharp and wider. And that's right away is going to give us maybe a feeling of someone who is super strong. As I'm doing that, as I'm increasing the chin sharpness and the shape of it, I still want to maintain kind of his lips being a little bit smaller, right? So and I actually do like this top lip to be kind of over the other lip. I think that's pretty cool. Now again, it's just all of these little preferences, right? Let's think about the fact that we want to maybe push this in a little more. Just make this come out, and I'm gonna take my move and also press in. I'm also gonna take my move brush and press in these temples a little more. And again, I'm just trying to maintain kind of this. Oh, I see your skull, right? Look, maybe these are a little bit too far, but I do like them down, right? So we have kind of the most important elements in place. So now we can just maybe start adding a little more detail. Let's grab something like the Damien standard, and let's just start sculpting this face a little more. So to emphasize the lips, I can hold down the Alt key. Let me turn my lazy mouse up, and what I can do is I can just I'm gonna add a little more definition to the bottom lip. I could do the same thing with the top lip. I'm going to grab my inflate and just slightly inflate all of this here. Let's grab our inflate, and holding down the Alt key, I can press this part in. Just make sure that we kind of stay true to some of the basic kind of anatomy, right? I can smooth this out just a little more. And I'm gonna grab my Damien standard. Let's give him kind of a line here. For the chin, I'm gonna grab my inflate, and holding down the Alt key, I'm just gonna press in this part here just a little bit, so the chin kind of comes out, right? I can grab my Damien standard, and holding down the Alt key, I can maybe add a little line here, so it's a little sharper, and I can just smooth the edges, right? So I kind of blending them in, so it looks like the chin actually has some kind of a shape to it. And if we wanted to make these features sharp as well, holding down the Alt key, we can draw a line here as well. And let's just continue blending it. And I really want to blend in the part where it started and just maintain those sharp features, but I don't want to maintain the starting point, right? That's pretty cool. Let's grab something like the pinch, and let's pinch these cheeks a little more. Again, do smooth. If we wanted to pinch this area here too, we could do that. And maybe even the bottom a little. We can decide if our character needs nostrils or not, and again, I wanted to make sure that the nose is kind of small and doesn't really take too much attention. But if we wanted to, we could add just a little bit of a shape here as well. We can also add a couple lines here. Just again, make them a little more alien, a little more creature-like, and just really smooth these out. So you can see there's some kind of a strange detail there that's a little unusual, right? That's the whole point, is just make it a little strange, right? For the brows, I'm going to hold on the Shift key and just smooth this out. And let's just add some detail here as well. Let's go ahead and really push this part in. And let's also push this in, right? We want to maintain this here. We can always press Ctrl D if we need even more resolution. That's fine. Keep in mind, it's not really that important to have a certain number of resolution to be too high or too low. The only reason you want to stay super low or kind of low is that you have more control over smoothing and your shapes. But as long as your base shape is low poly, right? This is all you really need for a game engine, right? Or even if it's not a game engine, even if you're just making a cool character, this is going to be your base topology, right? And all of this stuff right here, the super high one, is going to be baked into a normal map. So it's going to be a texture, right? So it doesn't really matter if you have a fast computer. It doesn't really matter how much you dial this up. You can go as crazy as 10 million just for the face, and it's not going to be a problem because that's going to be your high resolution bake version, right? So it's really important to understand for new artists that there's two versions to this. There's two layers to this, right? There's the topology low poly version that you're going to be using for rigging, animating, bringing into a game engine, whatever. And then there's the high one that's going to be used just for textures and details and sort of the presentation of your character, right? So there's like two different worlds colliding, sort of. And right now we are focusing on the high one because we already have the low, right? So now we just really need to make our high to look as the best that we can personally, right, as artists. And then that's kind of a basic but important point in case you're wondering, like, what is the workflow here? What are we doing, right? So again, just don't really worry about the number of polygons. Just do your best to see if you have enough to carry over some of the detail that you want to see in your character, right? So, you know, I could add some lines here maybe. And you know what? I'm not going to do too much on this because I actually want to add more detail for the eyes once we add some kind of a shape here, right? So I'm just going to leave it something like that. I don't really need to do anything with the eyes, right? I mean, we can just because I'm playing now, but and whenever you're doing this kind of stuff, just make sure you never have, like, you see how this part here needs to be super thin, right? So you could always smooth this out a lot, or you can just grab a pinch and just kind of hide that by pinching the ends. So you could do that, and that will make it look much better, right? So you can see right there, especially if you zoom in or you have kind of a high quality character, you want to make sure that you put a lot of love into pretty much each line, right? You don't want to rush. That's really important. All right, so he's already looking much better, I think. Let's talk about the ears and see if we like the ears. I'm not really too concerned about getting too crazy with the detail with the ears as well, but you know, let's keep it sort of simple. But we could maybe, instead of making it look so blobby, we could add a little sharpness to it. So we could do that by either pinching it, or again, we can just use Damien Standard. I'm going to use Damien Standard and just maybe emphasize, holding down the Alt key, I can emphasize this line here. So just maybe it's a little bit sharper. Okay. And let's smooth this out. Holding down the Alt key, I can press, let's just press maybe this part in. All right, very cool. If we wanted to push that in, I usually just like grab something like inflate and then just keep an eye on, are you adding or subtracting? In this case, I'm going to hold on the Alt key because I want to push this in and do something like that. That's fine. All right, so I'm happy with that. That's fine. So just even that looks already better, right? Now another interesting thing, if you dialed up your resolution super high, you can always dial it down just a little bit to clean something up. So maybe I want to clean up this spot here. If I dial this down to like 3, you can see that now I have a much better way to clean this up. It's easier to control. So I can smooth this and then I can go back to 5, and now this is going to be maybe a little more clean, right? So you can jump between these two as you're modeling and cleaning things up. Keep that in mind. All right, so I think the ear already looks a little bit better. Let's grab our Damien Standard and maybe just add a couple lines here. I'll just to give him just some detail, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to really smooth this out. He's crunching his face, so it's going to be a little deformed, right? All right, very cool. So you can keep going and add more and more detail if you want. We can maybe sharpen some of this just to give it, you know, give it a little more shape. Let's do something like that and just emphasize this brow. So he has a very strong brow here. And I'm going to smooth this out. And you can see how adding just all these little details starts to add up and really begins to paint a picture of what this character maybe is, right? For the back, let's maybe add a couple lines here. Again, I'm just going to smooth them out. All right, I'm not really too concerned about the top of the head because, you know, keep in mind we're going to paint this guy as well, right? So he is looking pretty good. Let's maybe add some kind of a sci-fi element to his eyes, right? So how do we do that? Let's take a look and see if we have anything to play with. I'm gonna go into my brushes and press I. And in here, let's see what we got. So we have something called IMM machine parts. And we also have IMM industrial parts, right? Let's go to the machine parts and see if we have anything that we can use for maybe an eye, like a sci-fi eye. I was thinking something along even these lines would be pretty much perfect. I'm gonna click on this, and if I attempt to insert it and see what that looks like, right, it's not gonna let me, because it's gonna say, hey, your head geometry is subdivided, and we can't insert an IMM brush into something that's subdivided, right? Because ZBrush doesn't really know how is that going to affect the brush that you're inserting, right? So how do we deal with that? Well, in the subtools, there's a button called Freeze Subdivision Levels. If I press on that and now attempt to insert my IMM brush, you can see that I can easily do so, right? Now, a couple problems. One, I'm not really getting the angle that I want. And two, I don't really need two of them. I just want to kind of focus on one because it's too much. So I'm going to turn off my symmetry, right? And what I want to do is I want to find a flat polygon that kind of faces the camera to drop down the IMM brush. So I'm just going to, you know what, I'm going to do one right here. That's fine. And I'll do something like this. And I think that's going to be a cool piece that we can turn into something that looks like, you know, some kind of a sci-fi eye, right? So what I need to do, I'm going to go to Subtools, and I'm going to split the unmasked and put this subtool on a different layer, which allow me to go back into my head layer, go to geometry, and let's go ahead and let's just go ahead and turn off freeze. And that's gonna take us back to our high-res mode. But the cool thing about this is that now we have this eyepiece on a separate layer, right? And we can of course see what the topology looks like, and it looks pretty perfect, right? So let's just leave it at this. If we wanted to see this as a high-res preview instead of kind of the super low poly one, right? We can always go to geometry, and we can turn on something called dynamic subdivide. And if I turn that on, you can see that I have a preview of what it looks like, but the points haven't changed, right? So it's just a preview. So I can even dial up the subdivision smoothness and get rid of any kind of issues with it. But again, it's not really you know, baked into the model. It's just doing a preview, which is really cool. Now let's go ahead and just grab our rotate, and let's just rotate this into something that makes a little more sense, right? So it looks a little bit nicer. I'm going to move it into position, and let's kind of start embedding this thing into the eye of the character. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that the top part is not overlapping with this inner circle. You see there's like an inner circle, right? I don't really want that to be affected. I kind of like how this looks. And now since we positioned it in this way, right, let's go ahead and move all of his skin towards this piece, because I kind of like the current position of this piece. You know, you can decide if you want it deeper in, you know, something like this or like that. It's totally up to you as a preference. The most important part really here is just the position of the circle, because that kind of indicates where his pupil would be, right? And you know what? I'm going to do something like that. That's fine. So let's say I'm happy with this, and we can turn it, right? We can rotate it, whatever you like. Let's say you're happy with it. Now let's go ahead and do this. Let's grab our move brush, hold down the Alt key, select our head. Let's do Control and drag to make sure it's not masked or anything, right? And don't even look at the left side. Let's just look at the right side. And let's just simply start kind of sculpting our head. We'll do like a custom sculpt, that embeds this metal piece into his face. So for that reason, I'm just going to maybe start moving this a little more. Again, I want to maintain this circle kind of clear. I want to maintain the brows looking down and kind of being, you know, almost like upset, angry kind of thing. So I like all of that. I don't want to get rid of that. And right here in the back, I think it would be cool if this was obviously kind of hugging the metal a little better. So something like that I think is better. And next, let's also add an additional sculpting to this, so it looks like it's really, like, you know, grown into the face a little more. And let's just maybe push this in. You see what I'm doing, right? I'm maintaining kind of this wave of skin going over the metal. I think that's really cool, right? So just take your time and add some love and imagine, how do you foresee the connection of the skin with the, you know, with the metal part, right? I'm gonna grab something like the Damien standard, and let's just maybe add a few lines, right? Maybe there's kind of like scar lines that were created a little bit when this thing was embedded in. Just do kind of a wavy scar lines going all the way around. And I'll do that on this side. And there's no right way or wrong way of doing this. It's just kind of a fun, creative. And you can also hold on the Alt key if you want to press some of this up, right? So some of the lines could be pressed in and some of them could be pushed up. And then I can really smooth this out. And then if you look back, you could start to see that it's a lot more interesting, right? It looks like it's really embedded in there. Let's do the same thing on the top as well. So I'm happy with this. Let's say I like this. Now, how do we take this piece and flip it to the other side? Or, you know, we should also just talk about, do we want to add some additional detail to this piece? And maybe we do, right? So let's go ahead and select this piece, and let's say, you know, in as a texture we can add some things in here, but let's just add maybe a stamp in the middle for a little more detail inside. So to do that, I can go to my standard brush. Let me select drag rectangular, and you're welcome to use any of these existing stamps, alphas in zBrush, or of course you can just in a matter of seconds create your own in you know, Photoshop, and just bring this in as a PSD. If you do that, just make sure that your shape that you are stamping is in Photoshop is, you know, white. Gray is going to be like in between, and then black is going to be the kind of the transparent value, right? So you could do that, but for this tutorial, I don't really need to do that. Let's just simply choose something that makes sense. Let me try this alpha 5 and see if that even works. All right, so and then for me to push it in, if I try to do it now, you can see that it's not doing anything, and that's because this is actually super low res, and this is a preview, right? Because we have a dynamic preview on. If I go to geometry, and if I say apply, right? As soon as I say apply, you can see that this whole piece turned into the actual 17,000 point mesh. And if I go into my geometry, you can see it was subdivided 4 times. So we still have the original one, which is right here, which we want to keep that. But now let's just create kind of a high res one for, you know, to hold our data, which is going to be maybe this element here. And we can decide if 4 is enough. We can do Control D to take it to maybe even level 5. And now if I attempt to drag this, you can see that I can add additional detail inside, right? So this piece would be like this, right? You can see that. If I switch it to add and do it, you can see how it's kind of raising. And you can do that. You can let go once you stamp something, and then press 1 a few times, and that's gonna add kind of an additional detail, right? If you like that. Another thing we can do is maybe choose something, you know, let's say I want to really push it in and make the inner part glow. How do I do that? Let me grab this 12, for example, and let's do subtract, and let's just increase the intensity. And what I want to do is I want to push this piece in, and I want to push it even more. I'm going to go to like 70, and let's just do something like, I'm going to add 3 dots. I'm totally concepting, making this stuff up as I go. I'm not even looking at the reference, but I'm just having fun. I'm going to do 3, and then my intention is to add a glow effect for these 3. So I think it'd be kind of cool to see this being, you know, like skin. I'm visualizing like a whitish skin, almost like those guys from Dune, right? You have kind of a white zombie dead skin, and then you got, this is going to be like shiny metal, and then the pieces inside, the circles inside are going to glow like maybe like electric blue or orange or something. So that's my vision for this, right? And again, I'm just having fun, but I think that's cool. I like this. Now, of course, you can play and see what you like, but let's say we want to flip this over to the other side, right? Let me go to Subtools. All right, so now how do we copy this over to the other side, right? How do we mirror this over? Well, the easiest way would be to simply duplicate it, right? Let's just duplicate it. And now there's 2 of them in the same space. And here's the thing. If we try to mirror this, right, it's not going to let us mirror it, because if you go into geometry, you will see that the subdivision level has, this model is actually subdivided dynamically, right, to 5 different levels. So if something in ZBrush is subdivided, it's not going to be able to be it's not going to be able to be mirrored over. So if I press mirror, you can see I'm actually going to get a error, right, saying this function cannot be applied to a mesh with multiple subdivision levels. So how do I deal with that? What I need to do is I'm going to delete lower, and now since I deleted lower, this doesn't have any subdivision levels anymore, which means I can flip it over, right? Now, if I flip it over, I don't like the fact that I don't have the subdivision levels. How do I get them back, right? Just like this piece here, I want this piece to also have subdivision levels because I want to maintain that low res one. So what I could do is I can click reconstruct subdivision levels, and that's going to do it for me. And if you remember correctly, we had it on level 5, right? So we could do the same thing. We can just say, we can press this as many times as we want. If I press it 4 times, I now have the same 5-level subdivision level as here. So a really cool trick to flip your geo over to the other side and then just reconstruct your subdivision levels, right? So you can see that the low one is right here, and then the baking one that we could use, the high one is right here, right? And that works perfectly. So a cool little trick. Now the other thing that you're gonna notice, obviously, right, is that now the face is gonna need to be the same way, right? We need to flip this over as well. Or if you wanted to be, if you want to avoid kind of the symmetry, usually a really good model, if you really want to take it, to the next level, especially with the face, normally you don't want to have too much symmetry happening. And this was so easy to do that instead of flipping it over and having this eye to be exactly 100% identical, right? Why don't we just very quickly just kind of do the same thing and just quickly sculpt it to what we want it to be, right? So maybe, we'll raise this up just like we did before. And the cool thing about doing it like this is that now there's going to be some imperfections, right? So you can see that this one is a little bit higher than that. And in my personal opinion as an artist, right, and I'm going to even lower this here, I think that is going to be a lot more interesting than something being perfectly symmetrical. If you don't agree, you can just simply mirror it over. If you do agree, just spend a few more minutes tweaking things and making it, a little more custom, just like we did before, right? So I can grab this piece here and just pull this in. I mean, it didn't take that much work anyways, right? Let's do something like that, pull this over, and we can take a look and see how it looks here. And I like that. And the only other thing that I did on my side was the Damien standard, and I just added some lines, right? So I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to try to put these maybe in a little bit different location, right? And if I want to raise a couple, I could do that. Okay. And let's just maybe add one here. All right, so now if I pull back and take a look at my character, I personally think it's better, right? It's a little more custom. And it looks like there's a lot more going on here. Let me just add a little more. So we also have a couple lines here. All right, so when you can, it's really cool to break the symmetry. All right, awesome. Let's see, what else can we do? Let's add maybe a couple veins. And to create the veins, I could just use the standard brush. Let me switch this to dots. I'm going to turn the alpha off, and let me just switch it to add. Way too much intensity. Let's adjust the intensity to something like 20, and I think that's pretty much perfect. And let's just give them a couple of veins. If you wanted to look at a couple of references of how veins usually work, you know, if you look at your anatomy, it's usually going to come up like this from kind of the bottom and just branch out. You know, something like that is what it normally looks like. And same thing, I don't want to create symmetry, so I'm going to do one on this side. And if I wanted to add more on this side, I could do the same thing. I just kind of go from the bottom. Let's just do something like that. And you see that I'm also creating these waves. That makes it a little more interesting as well. So maybe you don't want to make them perfectly straight. You know, maybe you don't want to do this. That doesn't really look like a vein to me. It's more like a tree, right? And then you want to blur them out so it looks like it, so it feels like it's under the skin, right? And again, totally up to you. But I think all of those little things add cool detail, and you can see how it actually looks pretty awesome that it's not exactly the same, right? All right, so I think that takes care of our face. We can just keep going, right? This is like a never-ending thing. You can do this for a long time, but I'm trying to figure out where would be a good place to be efficient. Let me move this down, and I feel like the lips could add have a little more detail as well. Let's just do something like this one. Alpha 61 is fine, and we can decide if we want to add or subtract. But if I turn on the symmetry, let's just maybe add a couple lines on the lips, something like that. We can do the same thing to the top lip. So all the subtle detail is going to be able to exist in the normal map, which is really cool, right? If we decide to turn this into like a game character. I personally like this. Let's add maybe another, feels like the nose could be a little bit sharper to me. I'm going to turn my intensity down, maybe like 20. And let's just add like a line. I'm going to switch it to add. Let's just add like a line here. Maybe I can smooth this out. And that's going to give the character a little more stylized feel, just a personal artistic preference. You can even add something here as well, make the nostril a little sharper too. All right. All right, now again, the neck is going to be connected to the body with some kind of a metal piece, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't give our neck a little love. Let's give a little detail to the neck. Maybe we'll give him a little kind of a neck thing here, and then we'll go to pinch. Let's just pinch this. All right, then I can smooth this out. I think that's going to be important just to maintain some of that basic anatomy stuff, right? Let's go ahead and go to, I'm just going to grab my standard, or let's just go do inflate, that's fine. And let's add a couple suggestive muscles that we know, right? So we know that there's going to be, if you look at the reference for, for the neck, right? There's going to be a muscle going from kind of the back here to the front. And it's going to look something like this, right? So you want to maybe add that volume there. And you also know that it's going to do something like this. Holding down the Alt key, we can press these pieces in, and you can see how it's going to start breaking that smooth shape. And if you're doing that, and even if you smooth this out and really, really just try to hide some of that detail, right? It doesn't take a lot, but your eye will catch the fact that, oh, I can see there's some bones underneath the skin. And so when you put those bones into place, you just want to make sure as a new artist that they are, that they're placed properly, right? Because your eye will quickly catch if something looks weird, right? So that's important, right? All right, so I'm pretty happy with that. Let's go ahead and see if we can maybe do a little more work on the body as well, right? You can see the difference, right? Because we gave the head so much love and attention, it looks, much better, right? Than, for example, the body. Very nice. So just like we did with the head, let's do the same thing. Let's grab the body, and you know what? I'm going to move this up, and I'm going to move it up, telling myself that all the pieces that are on the top are going to be ones that I kind of processed or added higher res to, and then all these pieces down there are still, need to be worked on, right? So now for the body, let's just do the same thing. Let's just decide if we want to keep some of this topology, and we really don't, right? Because this topology is total nonsense. This is a dynomesh low res. So let's take a different approach for the body than we did for the head. Let's just completely go into heavily into dynomesh. And then what we could do is once we create a beautiful high-res dynomesh version with our body, with the veins and all the details, then we can make a copy of it, and then we'll just kind of dial it down using zRemesher to create a low poly frame. And then we'll have two for baking as well, right? So there's many different techniques and workflows. A lot of artists will create the low poly first and then dial it up and maintain their topology, kind of like we did with the head, right? You saw me saving the topology and saving that low res version. And then another approach would be the opposite. It's completely ignore all topology, just go full hardcore into sculpting, do everything you can, don't even watch the polys, have a crazy looking model, and then as step 2, go back in and kind of lay down the topology or make a low poly using zRemesh and then bake it. So it doesn't really matter. One is not better than the other. It's just different preferences of workflows, right? And I kind of like both. I don't really have one that I usually, honestly, I usually prefer the high res to low res. And I know a lot of artists go low res to high, so it doesn't really matter. But in this case, let's just go high to low. So I'm gonna turn off my poly frame, and let's just give us a lot more resolution. How do we give ourselves more resolution? Let's just simply dial this up, right? Right now it's in 128. Let's go to 256 and press enter. And now watch your points. If I do control and drag, it's gonna go from 6 to 24,000. Now I have a lot more. And if I turn my polyframe, I can see what that looks like. And we can decide if we like that or if we need even more, right? I think we can just go ahead and jump into 512, honestly. I'm just doing it gradually to show you the process. If you do control and drag, nothing has happened, and that means that nothing has changed on the mesh for the mesh to be re-dynomesh. So a lot of times what you have to do is you have to hold on the shift key and just touch your model just a little bit and do control and drag, and you can see now it went to 97,000 points. And that's a lot better, right? Now if I polish this a little more, I have this kind of a nicer looking, you know, I have a lot more resolution to play with, and maybe that's what I want, right? Now you might ask yourself, in addition to cranking up resolution this way, can I also subdivide it? Can you subdivide a dynomesh? And you absolutely can, right? So what does that mean? If I go to geometry, I can see that I don't have any subdivision levels, but if I press Ctrl D, that's gonna double my resolution, right? And it's gonna subdivide my model. And that's a kind of an interesting workflow too, because you can use both. You can use the dynomesh resolution and you can use the subdivision levels as well to work together. And that's totally fine. Just make sure that you keep track of each one and you know what you're doing, right? Because it's a little more, maybe a little more advanced. So you can do that too, right? That took me to 394. Now I have double subdivision levels, I have dynomesh. It's kind of all over the place, but it doesn't matter again, because the bottom line is I'm just looking for ways to add more faces, right? And let's just start adding a little more definition to this. I'm gonna grab my Damien standard and let me just start. Let me turn my active symmetry on. I'm gonna go into sub mode, and let's just add some of those initial lines that we had in place, right? Now keep in mind when you're doing this, maybe one of the things you want to make sure is you want to, when you connect, don't just stop, go a little bit past, and that's going to get rid of that weird connection line a lot of times. So you could do that. Let's go ahead and go down the middle. Now if I want to go down the middle, is there a way to draw a perfect line? And there is. You can just start dragging, hold down the shift key, make a line, and then let go, and that's going to give you a perfect drop down the middle. To draw a perfect straight line, let me just really press this in a lot. And remember, we talked about this in the first video. You kind of want to have like a 4-pack on top above the belly button, and then you have kind of this split with another one here, right? It's coming kind of from the rib cage, and that kind of creates kind of the illusion of 6-pack, and we talked about this in our last video. All right, so you can see that I'm just using my Damien standard to kind of press the detail, and you know, if you wanted to move some of these pieces around, right? Let's say I want to really focus on the belly here, right? One of my pieces here is a little off scale, so I can always grab my move, make it kind of large, and you know, I can easily adjust this, right? All right, so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just using the reference to kind of push in all the most important elements of the muscles, right? And there's really not much to say. Just use kind of Damien standard. And one important thing is that you want to pay attention to the muscles, the chest kind of. It's never really perfectly straight. You know, it depends on how stylized your character is, but normally you want to add a little movement here to the chest. Just kind of break this up a little. You could do that. And a lot of times, you know, if you don't want to make it symmetrical, you can break the symmetry here as well. And that just will make it look a little more natural. So just doing something even like this. I'm not really sure if our guy is gonna need nipples or not, but if you wanted to, you just do like a little line there, right? Kind of, again, just suggest it. You just have to know where that is. And maybe, you know, my intention is to add some chains to all of this. A lot of times if you create something super bubbly and it starts to look too bubbly, a really cool trick, if you wanted to, is just grab something like the trim dynamic, right? And if you turn your Z intensity down, what you can do is you can just kind of trim this down. And I know it might start to look more like a rock, But a lot of times, again, if you're making a stylized character, this is a really cool way to take something that looks super blobby and bubbly and just add a little more surface detail to it, right? So it's almost like it's like a surface noise, and you can see how by flattening this down, right, it's creating a little more interesting look to it. And I can even do that here as well, right? Just a little bit. Just add some, just break some of that blobby stuff. And I can do that in the front as well. And very quickly, it's just a matter of going around and adding detail, and then having a really good reference for your muscles, right? So let me just do a little more, and again, I'm just using the Damien standard. All right, so like right here, maybe I can add a little more definition for the biceps. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't mind actually seeing the arms and seeing how that actually fits in. And you can see right here, I actually have already a little situation, right? I need to push this in. And right here, like I'm starting to feel like this is too blobby. I can go to my trim and just start trimming this down. So instead of pushing it in with the move brush, I can just make something super blobby and just go in and trim it. And just be careful not to mess up the other part, right? And just by doing this, I think it's going to create a cool stylistic feel. And then you can smooth it out. Even in addition to this, right, what you could do, let me just do a little more. All right, so even if you have something like that and that looks pretty good, one really cool trick that you can quickly make this even more interesting is if you go into your geometry and go into clay polish. In clay polish, you have all these different dials, but even if I leave this as is, watch my mesh and see what happens when I do clay polish. It starts to really dial in and make it even more interesting and more stylized. You see it's adding these really cool lines that are flowing with the geometry. So clay polish is a really cool trick as a final touch-up. And let's look at the front. You can see what that's doing, right? It's really taking your shapes and your work and emphasizing it even more. And a really cool little trick. All right, so hopefully you got to something similar, right? And next, let's just maybe polish up just a couple more things and maybe add a couple veins that, again, they should not be symmetrical, right? So what I'm going to do is, as a final kind of touch, let me push in this belly button a little more. I can pull out this here, emphasize where the chest is. And to add some of those veins, just like I've done before, I'm just going to grab my standard brush, switch it to dots, and I'm going to leave my alpha off. Turn off my symmetry. And again, it's really important to have a good reference, but in this case, I can add something to the biceps. I can turn on the intensity a little more. Maybe I have some couple veins here, right? And you don't have to do too much, but it's just a little detail is really cool. He even has one in the back here, which is really interesting. I don't really think I'm going to even do that. Let me just add some more here. And then again, when you smooth them out, it really starts to look like it's under the skin, right? And I usually just hide the front where I start the vein, and then just a little bit in the middle, and just do a nice job fading, right? All right, awesome. So before we end this tutorial and continue in part 3, let's maybe create some kind of a interesting connection between the head and the neck, right? And I can decide if I like the position of the head. Maybe I want to, have the head to be out just a little bit more. give myself some of that room that I need. Now this is cool, right? This is a good opportunity to take a look at the new trick. If I wanted to move my head out of the body, you can see that my little sci-fi goggles are not following along, right? How do I move my head and have these guys follow along, right? How do I do that? So what I could do is in here you have this little thing. If you click on it, you can see that it's going to turn on this list, right? Now the list is indicating anything that is visible is going to move with the subtool. So let me turn that off for example. And what you want to do is let's turn off the hands. We don't want to move the hands. We do want to move the eyepieces, and I also don't want to move the body, right? So what I could do now is if I turn this on and start moving, and you know what, let me turn off the symmetry, let me recenter this and reset the pivot. Now if I move this, you can see that these are gonna if I attempt to move the head, you'll see that the eyes will follow, right? You can see what that how that works. Now the crazy thing about that is that I actually need to see the body, right? Because I'm moving the head. How do I freeze the body and only move the head with the metal pieces? Well, what I can do is I can select the body and I can certainly mask it out, right? So I can do Control and drag to mask all of that out. So now I have a reference of where the body is. And that means if I go back into the head with this thing turned on, I can move the head and have the body stay still, right? So I'm gonna actually move this out a little more because we added all that cool neck detail that maybe could be useful, and this will also work well if we add some kind of a metal ring on his neck, right? So let me do something like that. And now I can turn this off, right? I'm done moving the little goggles, and I'm gonna go back into the body. And what I'd like to do is I'm gonna unfreeze it, unmask it. And now what I wanna do is I wanna extract some geometry out of it to use for kind of the neck piece. So how do I do that? So if you remember when we were sculpting it, we actually ended up subdividing it. So I'm going to delete lower. I don't really need the lower. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Control key, turn my active symmetry on, and let's just draw a piece of geometry that we like, that we could use. So I'm literally just going to draw a ring going all the way around, like a custom ring going around the neck. And I'm not concerned about what it looks like. All I need is just some kind of geometry that is perfectly aligned with the body that will allow me to play and sculpt further, right? Now, I don't care about what it looks like. I just need some of it, and I need it to be in a specific place. Because I need it to be in a specific place and to be a certain, on a certain angle, that's why I'm extruding it versus like inserting something. So it's just a preference or a little trick, right? Now, once we have this, how do we turn this into geo that we could use? Well, if we go into Subtool, we have something called Extract down here. If I click on the Extract, I can see what that looks like. I can do a little preview by just saying Extract, and you can see what that looks like. And I know initially it's going to look really terrible, but again, just think of it as adding more toys to our sandbox, right? We just need something to play with to start. So let's change the thickness to be much thicker. So I'm going to double that 0.0. I'm going to go 0.05 actually. And let's do extract and see if that's a little bit better. That's exactly what I was looking for. So I'm going to say accept. As soon as I say accept, it was added as a new layer, right? So you can see it's away from the body. Now it's its own layer. And now we have this cool thing that we can start sculpting and turning it into something that is pretty awesome. Let's do Control and drag, get rid of the mask and take a look at it. And the next thing that I personally like to do is we can do a couple things. We can decide if we want to trim it, or we can turn it into something like a low poly topology using zRemesher and then use zModeler to add more details. So many different ways to approach this, but The very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my move, make my brush a little bit larger. If we wanted to move this around, we can maybe press this in, make sure it's, you know, inside the neck and we don't have any kind of strangeness there. That's pretty cool. And let's just zRemesh it and see what that gives us, right? So to do that, I can go to geometry. I can jump into zRemesher right here. And before you do, quick tip, save your work. And now I'm gonna, let's leave adapt on, that's fine for now. And I'm gonna leave everything as is, it's 5. I'm gonna leave my active symmetry on because this is symmetrical. And I'm just gonna say zRemesh. If I turn on my polyframe, I can see what it's doing, right? Let's switch this to way lower, to like 1, and do zRemesh. All right, that's starting to get a little more clean looking. Let's do half, zRemesh. And I'm gonna keep pressing half until I dial it down to way something more simple. Now, as I'm dialing it down, you can see it's not really responding, and that's because the adapt is on. But if I turn adapt off, right? Adapt means it's gonna hold these edges. You can see how it's inserting more edges to hold this sharp corner, right? Adapt will make sure that the distribution is a little more even, and you can control the placement of the grid here as well, right? So if I turn this to this, it's going to give me a more even distribution of the polygons. And if I say, for example, you know, detect edges, adaptive 0, and do zRemesh, you can see the distribution has changed tremendously, right? And now it's a little more low poly and a little more manageable, and that's what I was going for. So I'm gonna keep dialing it down even more. So maybe just see one more. That's a little too much. I think that I'm gonna go, let's see if I like this. I think kind of like this one. All right, so let's just continue adding some detail to this guy. So the first thing I would like to do is maybe let's crease some of these edges. I'm gonna jump into solo mode and let's crease an edge, right? So I'm kind of finding this corner to be useful, right? So what I could do is let's go to zModeler, let's hover over the edge, press space bar, let's go to crease. I'm going to do edge loop complete, and I'm just going to simply, let me turn off my X symmetry, and let me just click on this edge right here, and you can see how it got creased all the way around, right? Let's see, maybe I want to maintain kind of this crease here, and you know, maybe I want this one too. And I think that's pretty much it. I don't really care. I guess I could crease this one down here as well. All right, let's say we creased all these. Let's also turn off detect edges, and let's just do half and do zRemesh. All right, and you can see that it's kind of restructured itself to give us the creases being kind of on the, you know, along the corners, right? I would love to change the poly loop of this inside one. So let me hover over a face. Let's go to poly groups. We can do poly loop. And let's just go boink. We could do that. And now we can play with this, right? So let's do Q mesh, and we can do polygroup all, and let's just maybe push this in. Now we have kind of this cool embed in here. Just add a little more detail. I know it's not really looking right with the neck there. So let me fix that. I'm gonna grab my move brush, make it kind of ginormous. And I'm really not loving the way this is. I like the back, right? That makes sense. This here doesn't look right. Let me actually just extend this. And essentially what I want to do is just have the head to be part inside this blue circle. And that, make my brush a little smaller, just extend this a little more. I think that is what I was going for. Could do that. We could create a little space there, or not, whatever. Just do something like that. Yeah, I like this. All right, let's just add some more awesomeness. Right? Let's create some kind of cool connections and play with zModeler a little more. So let's go to zModeler and let's create maybe a kind of connection between maybe this face and this face, right? How do we create like a little bridge here? So what I could do is let's turn our active symmetry on, so we're doing it on both sides, right? Let's hover over the face, press spacebar. Let's go to delete, and let's just simply delete like this and this. Okay, and then I'm gonna hover over an edge and go to bridge, and let's just do 2 holes. So I'm gonna say 2 holes. As soon as I press 2 holes, you can see like this third panel opened up, and this has a bunch of options. It has spline, circle, round corners. We can say, we can just keep it on spline, and you can try these other ones, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click on this edge and come here and click on this edge and just hold it and then start dragging. And as I start dragging, you can see that I can kind of create some craziness. If I drag this up and down, I can control the resolution, and I want to maintain it kind of low res, right? So I'll do something, even something like this, I think is what I was going for. I think that's pretty cool. Let's do a couple more, right? So let's do one more here. So same thing, I'm gonna say delete. I'm gonna delete this one, and now click on this edge and click on this edge. And that's gonna automatically give me another one. And I like that. All right, so that's cool for the back. If we wanna do, let's create some kind of a fun inset here, right? Let's do, let's go into inset, and let's do inset each poly. And I'm gonna do inset, I'm gonna do a single poly, each poly, right? And then what we could do is let's just start insetting one. So we'll do something like that. And let's repeat the same thing maybe here. It's saying I don't have symmetry on. That's fine. I'll turn my symmetry off. And let's just do something like that. And you know what? I'm feeling like 4 is what I wanted. So now I have these 4 holes. If I go back in here, I can go back into QMesh, polygroup all, and let me just push this in, right? And now I'm just creating kind of this cool sci-fi ring looking thing over his neck. So I think that's pretty cool. Now mine, I kind of broke my symmetry, so that's okay. You can always do mirror and weld if you want to maintain some of that symmetry, but I think for now this is fine. If I wanted to add some more detail in here, let's hover over an edge. Let's go to bevel, and let's see. So we got bevel, edge loop complete, so we'll go all the way around. Let's just create ourselves like a little bevel here. And now you just decide if you want to push it in or pull it out. I'm going to go to QMesh, polygroup all, and just maybe push it in. Do something like that, or we can pull it out. I think in is better. All right, I like that. If I go into bevel, I can also bevel this edge just a little bit so it's not so sharp. And maybe if I wanted to repeat that on this one, I can click and do the same thing here. Now I have both of those edges kind of beveled. All right, let's take a look and see if we like this. If I turn off my polyframe, I can see what that looks like. So very quickly, I just went from kind of a high-res sculpting to low poly zModeler, modeling, right? And just to make it even more fun, let's just add maybe an inset here. I'm gonna do inset, let's do single poly, and let's just do something like that. And then I'll click here, and I forgot to turn on my symmetry, so I'll do that manually. Let me go to QMesh, and let me just pull this in. And if you pull in too much, right, it's going to delete itself, so maybe you don't want to do that. So don't do too much. I just want to do like a little inset. So it looks like there's some kind of a detail there. All right. So you can keep adding more and more detail. Let me turn my arms on. And I think this is probably a good place to stop for us, right? Because in the next video, let's hold on the Shift key and click on all of these pieces. In the next video, we can go in and play with the, with the forearm, right, with the glove, and then the pants should be super simple. And then as a final detail, we can add more sci-fi elements like chains, maybe some hanging rags and all of that. But I think this video is probably getting a little bit too long. So I think I'm going to stop here. If you wanted to preview this as like a high-res version of it, right? If you select your ring, and then again, quick reminder, make sure you save your subtool. If you turn polyframe off and do Control D, right? Obviously, you're going to start getting like this very smooth-looking shape, and maybe that's something you want, right? If that's something you don't want, let me go into geometry, dial this back down. What you could do is you can go into crease. We can say crease polygroups, right? Just click on that one time. And now if we do Control D a few times, you can see that you're going to get a much different result. And that is kind of what I was going for, right? So I have these kind of sharp edges mixed with not sharp edges, right? Again, just a matter of preference. But all right, so I'm going to stop the video here. And of course you can touch this up as well, right? You can always grab the move brush, and right here you can see maybe there's a little, maybe I want to lift this up a little bit, and I can do that on both sides. I can maybe lower this, and I like the fact that it's not symmetrical. If you want to keep it symmetrical, you can, but you can always adjust any of these, right, at any moment. But all right, so thank you for joining me in part 2. I hope you're having as much fun as I am, and I'll see you guys in part 3.